sexually assaulted can have long-term physical effects. Being sexually assaulted is a harrowing experience, something that leaves its survivors feeling shaken, vulnerable, angry and in pain. If the attack was violent, it can leave physical scars. We know now more than ever how emotionally destructive it can be, and what psychological trauma it can cause. We can scarcely go a day at the moment without hearing a woman or man's experience of sexual assault, such is the momentum of the #MeToo movement. We are seeing, like never before, the devastating effects abuse can have. It can be utterly transformative. One act of sexual violence or coercion can disrupt an entire career or life. But, until recently, we didn't know how adversely the experience of trauma might affect our physical health. We particularly did not know quite how harmful it could be to our bodies in the long term. New research from the University of Pittsburgh suggests that emotional trauma, like the experience of being assaulted or attacked, can have significant consequences for a person's heart health. Dr Thurston, professor of psychiatry, psychology, and epidemiology at the University of Pittsburgh and director of the Women's Biobehavioral Health Laboratory, has found that experiences like sexual assault can affect the cardiovascular system. She presented her team's findings at the North American Menopause Society annual meeting in America. Essentially, they found that the experience of trauma can affect the elasticity of blood vessels and the ease of blood flow, and ultimately therefore the health of the heart. For the experiment, Dr. Thurston tested 272 women between the ages of 40 and 60. None of them were smokers and none of them had any signs of cardiovascular problems. They were examined physically in a lab and then asked to do a series of questionnaires, the Brief Trauma Questionnaire and the Child Trauma Questionnaire. These are designed to ascertain what their experiences of trauma over their lifetimes have been. In that group, 60% of women reported some sort of emotional trauma in their lives. Of that 60%, 20% had been through sexual harassment, 22% had experienced unwanted sexual contact and 20% had been beaten or mugged. We were moved, but not surprised, given national statistics on this topic. Dr. Thurston says of the number of women who disclosed that they had been attacked, touched or beaten. Then came the physical bit. Researchers tested how well these women's blood vessels were transporting blood around their bodies. They use an ultrasound machine and a blood pressure machine to test how flexible the blood vessels in the arm were. A healthy person has lovely, flexible blood vessels so that the blood can flow easily. Those vessels are thought to be a good indicator of how the arteries closer to the heart are functioning, and so a good way of testing heart health. The women who'd been traumatized in their lives had stiffer blood vessels, indicating poorer heart health. This, says Dr. Thurston, is our proof that trauma has physiological effects. We conclude that the more traumatic experiences an individual has over her life, the greater her risk for cardiovascular disease later in life, she tells us. This relationship does not appear to be fully explained by things like smoking, alcohol use, obesity, blood pressure, or depression. I suspect that individuals who have experienced a high burden of trauma in their lives will be more likely to develop health problems later in life. The risk is particularly great if she also has poor or short sleep. What remains to be understood is whether treating the trauma and the related psychological symptoms will improve a woman's vascular health. It seems that trauma doesn't just affect the heart, if other scientific studies are anything to go by. Vegan Bodybuilding Week 3, Why you need to eat more calories to start losing body fat. Yet more proof that cinnamon might make you thinner. Bike brand causes outrage with sexist advert. Researchers at the University of California, led by Professor Michelle Albert, studied the data of 21,904 women and concluded that those who'd been through trauma in their lives were more likely to have problems with obesity. That trauma could have been sexual assault, the death of a child, physical violence against them or long-term unemployment. One traumatic event in their lives increased their chances of obesity by 11%, and that chance went up the more trauma they'd experienced. Anyone with 4 traumatic events had a 36% increased chance of being obese. Professor Albert believes that trauma either leads people to eat emotionally or triggers hormonal changes in their bodies that affects their metabolism. She advocates that we test and treat psychosocial issues along